Shalom. We are continuing melachim Beis. We're up to Perek Yud Gimel, and again, one of the difficulties in the book of melachim is we're constantly zigzagging between the Malchei Yehuda, who rule over Shevet Yehuda and Binyamin in the south, Yerushalayim and the Mikdash, and the Malchei Yisrael, who rule in Shomron over the 10 tribes. And we had just been discussing in great detail Malchus Yehuda, the dramatic coronation of Yayash, the only surviving member of Malchus Beis David that Asalia, who was Achav's daughter, did not kill. And we read about Yoash's plan to rebuild, not to rebuild, but to beautify and repair the Beis HaMikdash. Now we're zigzagging back to Malchus Yisrael. If you remember, Yehu was the one who wiped out all of the descendants of Achav. Yehu was king for 28 years, and now he was given a promise that 4 generations of his progeny would be melachim, and now we're going to talk about the first of his generations, his son who took over. Perek Yud Gimel, Pasuk Aleph, Bishnas Esrim B'Shalosh Shana L'Yayash ben Achazyahu, when the child King Yayash was in the 23rd year of his reign, Melech Yehuda, Malach Yehoachaz ben Yehu, Yehoachaz, the son of Yehu, is now going to be king in Shomron for 17 years, and as is inevitably the case, we have not had a righteous king of Yisrael at all. Vayas hara b'einei Hashem, he too did evil in the eyes of God. Vayelech achar chatesh Yeravam ben Nevat, he follows the ways of the very first king, Yeravam ben Nevat, asher hechti es Yisrael. Again, it emphasizes over and over again, it's not just the sinning, but it's causing others to sin. Lo sor mimenu. And as we said before, this is actually repeating something. Vayichar af Hashem b'Yisrael. God was angry at the 10 tribes. Vayitneim biyad Chazael melech Aram. And that is why Chazael, the king of Aram, was able to harass them. Vayitneim Biyad Chazael Melech Aram, Uviyad Ben Hadad Ben Chazael, and similarly, Chazael eventually died and was succeeded by Ben Hadad. Now Ben Hadad, it's interesting, Ben Hadad was the predecessor king of Aram, and Chazael actually killed him. He suffocated him. So it's kind of cute that he would name his own son in honor of the man that he killed when he became Melech. Perhaps it was to disguise the fact that he had murdered Ben Hadad. But the Ben Hadad, the son of Chazael, is the same name as the king of Aram that Chazael had murdered. So be it as it may, in the reign of Yehu's son, Chazael is giving a lot of trouble. Vayechal Yehoachaz es b'nei Hashem. Yehoachaz, Yehu's son, prays to Hashem. This finally brought him to tshuva. Vayishma elaf Hashem, and the Eibishter was makabel his tefillah, in spite of the fact that he had been an oved of Avodah Zarah, because this was tshuva. Ki ra es lachatz Yisrael, ki lochatz eisam melech Aram. The Eibishter had rachamim, that he saw the lachatz, he saw the oppression that Am Yisrael was suffering from melech Aram. Vayitin Hashem the Yisrael Mashi, Hashem gave Klal Yisrael a salvation. Vayetzu mitachas Aram. Now, the details will be told a little later, but it just shows that we were under the lachatz of Aram, we meaning the 10 tribes, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us a Yeshua, v'yeshvu b'nei Yisrael b'aleim ketmul shalshom, and the Jewish people, the 10 tribes, were able to live in tranquility as they had done previously. But once again, in spite of this Yeshua, the tshuva was not complete. Ach Laisaru mechatais beis Yeravam asher hechti es Yisrael ba halach v'gam ha'ashera amda b'shomron. Nevertheless, the Yidden did not turn away from the sins of Yeravam, who caused them to sin, and they also had asheros. Asheros are trees that are planted for idolatry, stood in Shomron. Ki lo hishir Yehoachaz am ki im chamishim parashim v'yasora rechev, v'yaseres alofim ragli, ki ibdam melech Aram, v'yisimeim ke'afor ladush. We are told that Chazael had decimated the armies of Yehoachaz. Yehoachaz, the son of Yehu, had a minuscule army. He had 50 cavalry, 50 horse riders. He had 10 chariots and only 10,000 foot soldiers, because the king of Aram had destroyed the army and he made them like dirt to be trampled on. So that's why the reference to Yeshua actually did not happen in Yehoachaz's lifetime. In Yehoachaz's lifetime, there was only oppression. And then we say, V'yasher divrei Yehoachaz v'chol asher rasu v'rasai halohem kesuvim al sefer divrei hayom l'malchei Yisrael v'yishkav Yehoachaz im aveisav. Yehoachaz died, the son of Yehu, v'yikbaru b'shomron v'yimlach Yoash b'nai Taklev. Again, very, very confusing, because the son of Yehoachaz, Yehu's grandson's name is Yoash, but Yoash is also the name of the child king in Malchus Yehuda. So right now you have two kings with the same name, and that's what Pasuk Yud says. Bishnas Shaleshim v'Sheva Shana LeYoash Melech Yehuda, the 37th year of Yoash Melech Yehuda. Remember, he rules for 40 years, but the 37th year, Malach Yehoash ben Yehoachaz, who is Yehu's grandson, al Yisrael b'Shomron, Sheish Esrei Shana, and once again, it's like a broken record, V'yas hara b'einei Hashem. Once again, Yehu's grandson, Yoash, does evil in the eyes of God. Loisor, Mikol Chatoy Sheravam ben Nevat. He does not depart from the sins of Yeravam. Asher hechti es Yisrael ba halach. V'yeser divrei Yoash v'chol asher asu v'rasu asher nilcham im Amatzia melech Yehuda. We're going to see later that he had a war with another king of Yehuda as well, but that's not even described in detail here. That's Kesuvim al Sefer Divrei Hayamim L'Malchei Yisrael Vayishkav Yoash im Aveisav V'Yeravam Yashav al Kisei. So this is the same name as the first Melech Yisrael, and this is the third generation of Yehu. We had Yehu, we have Achazyahu, we have Yoash, we have Yeravam, and Yoash died. This is the Yoash Melech Yisrael, Yehu's grandson, and he died b'Shomron in Malchei Yisrael. Okay, and so again, as I say, there is not a single Melech Yisrael of the 10 tribes that is recorded as a tzaddik. So now we have a digression to go back to the Navi Elisha, and this is the end of Elisha's life. The Elisha Chola es cholyai asher yamas bei. Elisha got sick with the sickness that he will die with. Vayered elav Yoash melech Yisrael. So now we're going earlier. So this is before Yoash died. So Yoash melech Yisrael went to visit Elisha. And although Yoash was a Rasha, but Yoash cried because he knew how great Elisha was. Vayaymar. And Yoash said, this is Yoash Melech Yisrael, said on Elisha the very same words that Elisha said about Eliyahu Hanavi. Avi, Avi. My father, Rechav Yisrael. You are the chariot of Am Yisrael. You support Am Yisrael like a chariot supports its rider. Uparashav. And you are also the one who rides. Again, these are two different imagery. A Rechav is what somebody stands on. Parashav is I ride on the horse, which means both things. You support us like a Rechav. You direct us like the rider of the horse. Vayomer lo Elisha. And Elisha tells Yoash, This is actually going to explain the Yeshua against Chazoyel. Kach keshes v'chitzim. Take a bow, and take some arrows. Vayikach elav keshes v'chitzim. And Yoash took the bow and the arrows. Vayomer lemelech Yisrael, and Elisha, who is dying, says to Yoash melech Yisrael, Harkev yadcha lekeshes, position your hand on the bow. Vayarkev yadai. Yoash positioned his hand on the bow. Vayasem Elisha yadav al yadei hamelech. Elisha put his hands over the king's hands. Vayomer. And Elisha then said, Pesach hachalain kedma. Open the window to the east. That's the direction of Aram. Vayomer Elisha. And Elisha said, Yirei, shoot the arrow. Vayor. Yoash shot the arrow. Vayomer. And Elisha said, this is a physical sign of what Hashem will do for you. Chetz Teshua Lashem. This arrow is symbolic of the salvation that Hashem will give you. Chetz Teshua Bi'aram. This is the arrow of salvation against Aram. Right? This is what we said before, that Hashem brought a Yeshua. V'kisa es Aram bi'afek ad kalei. That you will fight Aram in the town, outside of the town of Afek, and you will destroy them. Hashem had rachamim. Vayomer, Elisha then said, Kach hachitzim, take arrows, this is without the bow, Vayikach, and Yoash melech Yisrael took the arrows, Vayomer lemelech Yisrael, and Elisha said to the melech Yisrael, Hoch arza, kind of like a dart, throw the arrows into the ground. Vayach shalosh pamim, he did it 3 times with 3 arrows. V'yamod, and he stopped, because he wasn't told how many times to do it. Vayiktzayif olav ish alikim, and the Navi was angry at him. Vayomer, and the Navi said, Lahakais chamesh o sheish piyamim, if you would have done it more times, 5, 6 times. Again, the concept here is that the nevuah needs a physical sign to become niskashim. So if you would have done it 5 or 6 times, you would have been able to defeat Aram legamrei. Viata. But now that you didn't complete the process, Shalosh piyamim take es Aram, you will successfully fight Aram 3 times. Successfully, but you will not have complete victory. So the Yeshua is not going to be complete. Again, it's very, very schwer. I mean, how would Yoash know how many times to do it if Elisha didn't tell him? I mean, how could Elisha have a taina to him if he had no way of knowing? But it could be that Elisha told him, Kach chitzim. So it was understood that as many arrows as he took, he should throw to the ground. And apparently he took more arrows than he threw to the ground, and that he should have understood was not the siman. And this, by the way, is the Yeshua, or this is the nevuah of the Yeshua that was described earlier. So again, it's mesubach, it's a little out of order. Anyway, the pasuk tells us, Vayamas Elisha died, Vayikbaruhu, Elisha was buried, Ugedude Mayav Yavayu Be'aretz Bashana. So now it mentions that there were Moabite gangs, Moab from the east, that would come across the Yarden and do harassment and vandalism. Vayihi Haim Kovrimish, and it happened one time that this was a funeral, they were burying somebody, not Elisha. Vihine Ro Esagdut, when people saw the Moabite gangs coming, they got scared. Yashlichu es haish bekever Elisha. They kind of dropped the body to run away, and they dropped him on top of the kever of Elisha. Vayelech vayiga haish biatzmeis Elisha. And somehow the body of this man touched the bones of Elisha. Again, I'm not sure what's going on here, because obviously if this was after Elisha was buried, the kever would be covered. Elamai, why is Elisha's kever uncovered? It was also Elisha's funeral. Are we talking about two funerals happening at the same time? But be it as it may, it says they dropped the body because of the Moabite gangs. The body touched the bones of Elisha, and just touching the bones of Elisha created a Techiyas HaMesim. I mean, why didn't that work for Elisha himself? I don't know. But that was his Kedusha, that just touching the bones was Mechaye the Mace, Vayakam al Raglav. Anyway, going back to Chazoyel, the Chazoyel Melech Aram, Lachatz Es Yisrael, Kol Yemei Yehoachaz. Chazoyel, as we said before, this is a review, was oppressing Yisrael all the days of Yoachaz ben Yehu, as well as Yoash. Vayochen Hashem Aisam v'Yirachem v'Yifin Aleim, but Hashem eventually had mercy for them because of the bris. This is very similar to Yetzias Mitzrayim itself. Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Lo ava hashchisam. Hashem did not want to destroy his nation. V'lo hashlicham yal panav arata, and did not eradicate them. There was harassment, but no destruction. And Chazoyel eventually died. He was replaced by Ben-Hadad, his son. And we are told, as we said before, Yehoash was given victory over Chazoyel and Ben-Hadad, but it was not a complete victory. Right? Elisha said, because you didn't throw down all the arrows, your victory is not complete. And here we are told what was the partial victory that he had. Yehoash ben Yehoachaz, this is Yehu's grandson, Vayikach es-ha'orim yad ben Hadad ben Chazoyel, he was able to reclaim certain cities that Ben Hadad, the son of Chazoyel, had captured. Asher lokach miyad Yehoachaz ibn Milchama, and as the Navi said, Shalosh pa'amim hiko Yehoash. Yehoash successfully recaptured territory in 3 battles against Aram, Vayoshev es Orei Yisrael, and he was able to bring back the Orei Yisrael, but again, as Elisha told him, he will not be able to eradicate the enemy Legamri, because he only threw 3 arrows into the ground. So at this point, we have the 3rd generation of Yehu. We have Yoachaz, and we have Yoash, and the Nevuah of Elisha was Mekoyim, and Elisha has now left the world. Kol Tov.